I want to play part of this from your special. Listen.
There are millions of cheap seats in the world today, filled with people who will never once step foot in that arena. They will never once put themselves out there, but they will make it a full-time job to hurl criticism and judgment and really hateful things toward us. And we have got to get out of the habit of catching them and dissecting and holding them close to our hearts. We gotta let them drop on the floor. Don't grab that hurtful stuff from the cheap seats and pull it close. Don't pull it anywhere near your heart. And the cheap seats are like, in 22 years of doing this work, I've never seen the cheap seats like they are today.
Yeah.
Oh, Twitter is filled up.
You call them cheap seats, I call them haters.
Around the world, more and more people are living alone, which is not necessarily the same as loneliness, which is so bad in the UK right now that the government has created a minister for it.
Researchers say suffering through it can be as lethal as smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
What is loneliness? How do we define that in kids?
Yeah, and that's important because loneliness is really a subjective feeling, right? So you can be lonely in a crowd.
Right.
So it's not really about kind of having people around necessarily, it's how the individual feels themselves.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's a clear distinction to make. So
I just think, I agree with it, this is such a huge problem. It's like solving the problem of humanity. You can't, I mean, loneliness is part of the human condition. You can't just say, well, I'm a minister and somehow loneliness will be solved.
There are significant and very real health risks that are associated with this.
Very much so. Loneliness now is a greater public health concern than obesity and smoking combined. People don't think of loneliness as a problem or something they think, well, I'm sad. They don't identify the loneliness, but it's absolute work. You have to take it seriously.
I think it was quoted in that report that this a personal misfortune is becoming a social epidemic. What are the consequences, do you think, of that as somebody who studies people's minds and the way they work, Jackie?
You mean that loneliness is a
it's a personal misfortune, but it's becoming a social epidemic. If it's an epidemic, what are the consequences?
Well, the consequences are more depression, more early death, premature death, more of a sense of polarization in the society that we've been seeing, especially in America, where one side can't imagine even talking to the other side.
When we talk about connectivity in this day and age, there's an expectation that it will feed us. The world of social media is enough to sustain us.
I think the irony of social media is that it was intended to connect us, but I really feel like it disconnects us in a way. You know, on social media, you don't put out many vulnerable sides to you. This, oh, my life is perfect, everything is going great in my life. You put filters on your life, you put different things on your life to make your life look really great. And in that process, I feel that maybe you're not totally being honest with yourself, you know, and honest with other people.
Don't take criticism and feedback from people who are not being brave with their lives.
You know, we can't. And here's the thing. Here's what I've discovered. If you sum up all the research over 20 years, everyone wants to be brave. No one wants to be vulnerable.
Yeah.
And that is the rub. You know, that is what will reconcile our entire adult lives, is how do I be brave with my life, with my work, with my partner, with my kids, and stay safe and armored at the same time? And the answer is you don't. opposite of belonging from the research is fitting in. That's the opposite of belonging. Fitting in is assessing and acclimating. Here's what I should say, be. Here's what I shouldn't say. Here's what I should avoid talking about. Here's what I should dress like, look like. That's fitting in. Telling your story and never betraying yourself for other people. True belonging doesn't require you to change who you are. It requires you to be who you are. And that's vulnerable.
Best-selling author and social researcher. Her name is Brené Brown. She burst into public consciousness with her TED Talk in 2010. The Power of Vulnerability remains the site's 4th most popular talk. Listen to this, it has 36 million views. Wow.
Okay, so I'm a researcher. I study connection, I study vulnerability, I study love. And then I realized why I thought you were my tribe. I think it's because design is a function of connection. There is nothing more vulnerable than creativity. And what is art if it's not love? And a quote comes up. And I read it, and this is what it says. It's a quote from a speech that he gave in the early 1900s at the Sorbonne, and a lot of people call it the Man in the Arena speech. And this is the passage that changes my life. It's not the critic who counts. It's not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done it better. The credit belongs to the person who's actually in the arena, whose face is marred with blood and sweat and dust, who, at the best, in the end, knows the triumph of high achievement, and who, at worst, if he fails daring greatly. So the moment that I read that, I closed my laptop, and this is what shifted in me. 3 huge things. First, I've spent the last 12 years studying vulnerability, and that quote was everything I know about vulnerability. It is not about winning, it's not about losing, it's about showing up and being seen. And if you're going to show up and be seen, there is only one guarantee, and that is you will get your ass kicked. That is the guarantee. That's the only certainty you have. If you're going to go in the arena and spend any time in there whatsoever, especially if you've committed to creating in your life, you will get your ass kicked. So you have to decide at that moment, I think for all of us, if courage is a value that we hold, this is a consequence. You can't avoid it. The third thing, which really set me free, and I think Steve, my husband, would argue has made me somewhat dangerous, is kind of a new philosophy about criticism, which is this. If you're not in the arena also getting your ass kicked, I'm not interested in your feedback. Period. That's it. If you have constructive information, feedback to give me, I want it. And I'm an academic. I'm hardwired for wrestling around with stuff like that. If you say, hey, you forgot all this literature, or hey, you should have done this, or terrible sentence construction over here. Like, let's go, let's do it. I love that. But if you're in the cheap seats, not putting yourself on the line, and just talking about how I could do it better, I'm in no way interested in your feedback. Because vulnerability is certainly a part of fear and self-doubt and grief and uncertainty and shame, but it's also the birthplace of these. It's the birthplace of love, of belonging, of joy, trust, empathy, creativity, and innovation. Without vulnerability, you cannot create.
you.